Maybe we should just start messaging Nike, Instagram, and like putting some pressure on. Let's wait for 2027.
On November 8, 2025, in Riyadh, reigning world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka delivered a surprisingly candid message just minutes after losing the WTA Finals Championship match to Elena Rybakina. Maybe we should just start messaging Nike on Instagram and putting some pressure on. Let's wait for 2027 because that year is going to be sick, she said. The comment wasn't directed at a rival or the tournament. It was aimed at her own multi-billion-dollar sponsor, Nike. Just 4 days earlier, another moment had quietly fueled the conversation. Nike's most talked-about dress on the internet, a white $185 Grand Slam design featuring 7 origami-inspired floral appliques, wasn't being showcased by Sabalenka or Naomi Osaka. Instead, it was worn by 20-year-old Alexandra Eala of Manila, then ranked number 30 in the world. That contrast raised an intriguing question. If you were sitting across from Sabalenka's agent today, what would your advice be? Should she part ways with Nike when her deal expires at the end of 2026, or stay and see what 2027 brings? Share your prediction in the comments and include the year you think that decision will be made. To understand why this seemingly small detail has become such a major talking point, you only need one key piece of context. Over the previous 18 months, Nike had quietly given Alexandra Eala the kind of creative attention usually reserved for Grand Slam champions and signature athletes. She received a custom Sampaguita-inspired hair tie for Wimbledon, collaborated on a Filipino-inspired capsule collection, appeared on a Vogue cover dressed head-to-toe in Nike, and ultimately became the player chosen to debut the brand's flagship Wimbledon kit for 2026. On paper, however, Eala was still ranked around number 30 in the world, far below Aryna Sabalenka, the reigning world number 1, who would later joke that fans should start pressuring Nike on Instagram. Sabalenka's frustration hadn't suddenly appeared in Riyadh, it had been building throughout the entire 2025 season. At the Australian Open, after Naomi Osaka's outfit dominated the fashion conversation, more in the design process. By the time Roland Garros arrived, criticism of her apparel had become impossible to ignore. Yahoo Sports even published the headline, "Nike faces backlash over Aryna Sabalenka's French Open outfit." The reaction only intensified at US Open, where fans on Reddit's r/tennis mocked yet another version of Nike's recycled cutout silhouette. One of the most upvoted comments described the design as looking like one big horizontal boob with no shape, capturing the growing frustration with the brand's direction. That was the wardrobe Nike gave the world's number 1 player in 2025. While Sabalenka became the subject of memes and criticism tournament after tournament, Nike appeared to be investing its creative energy elsewhere. Behind the scenes, the company was carefully and deliberately building a very different campaign around Alexandra Eala. To understand how that happened, start on the morning of June 30, 2025. Alexandra Eala was about to step onto center court for the biggest match of her career, her Wimbledon main draw debut against defending champion Barbora Krejcikova. Before she walked out, Nike presented her with something no other player on tour received, a custom-made hair tie inspired by the Sampaguita, the national flower of the Philippines, packaged alongside a Filipino proverb. The gesture was widely covered, with Tennis.com highlighting the story, the tennis account on X sharing it, and Inquirer USA featuring it as well. This wasn't simply another piece of apparel, it was Nike placing a symbol of an entire nation on one of tennis's most iconic stages. That moment was only the beginning. A month later, the same white Sampaguita flower evolved into an entire collection. In August 2025, Nike Philippines launched the In Full Bloom capsule, co-designed with Filipino visual artist Georgina Quinto. Drawing inspiration from the flower first seen on Eala's Wimbledon hair tie, Quinto transformed it into a bold signature print for the collection. Eala unveiled the capsule on the cover of Vogue Philippines, dressed head-to-toe in Nike. For a player ranked around number 30 in the world, receiving a co-designed, culturally inspired collection and a Vogue cover was the kind of brand investment usually reserved for signature athletes and Grand Slam champions. That is precisely the level of creative collaboration Aryna Sabalenka had publicly said she wanted but felt she wasn't receiving. While Eala was being given personalized designs rooted in her identity and culture, Sabalenka was still wearing outfits that had become targets of criticism throughout the 2025 season. Put the timelines side by side. In June 2025, Eala stepped onto center court wearing a custom Sampaguita hair tie created exclusively for her. At almost the same moment, the world's #1 player was still searching for a greater voice in the designs carrying her name. While Alex Eala's relationship with Nike kept growing, Aryna Sabalenka's apparel story moved in the opposite direction. At Roland Garros in 2025, her Nike kit drew heavy criticism from fans, with many mocking its awkward cutout design and dubbing it the uniboob dress. The backlash didn't end there. Through August and September, Sabalenka wore variations of essentially the same silhouette throughout the US Open swing, reinforcing the perception that Nike had stopped innovating for the world's #1 player. At the very same time, Eala's profile inside the brand continued to rise. In August 2025, she received a co-designed Filipino-inspired capsule collection and appeared on the cover of Vogue Philippines wearing Nike from head to toe. Then, in November, she was photographed wearing one of the most anticipated tennis outfits Nike had produced in years, the $185 Naomi Osaka Slam Dry Fit dress, the brand's official showcase piece for Wimbledon 2026. Featuring an all-white micro-pleated hem and 7 three-dimensional floral appliques inspired by Japanese kirigami and origami, the dress became an instant sensation and sold out before Wimbledon 2026 had even begun. Most importantly, the first player the world saw wearing it wasn't Osaka or Sabalenka. It was Alex Eala. That distinction matters. Nike didn't design the dress specifically for Eala. It was Naomi Osaka's signature showcase piece. But in some ways, that makes the contrast even more striking. By placing a player ranked around number 30 in one of its premier women's designs, Nike signaled that Eala belonged in the same conversation as one of its biggest global stars. She was being treated like a flagship athlete. Meanwhile, Sabalenka, the reigning world #1, was still fighting for creative input on the outfits she was expected to wear. 4 days after photos of that dress spread across the internet, Sabalenka sat down in Riyadh, following her 6-3, 7-6 loss to Elena Rybakina in the WTA Finals Championship match. Asked about her outfit and her plans for 2026, she revealed that the dress she was wearing had only come together because she had pushed Nike to incorporate her own ideas. As she put it, it was kind of like together work, me and Nike. I just threw a bunch of ideas I had, and I was able to push them to give me, in a way, like my own dress. In other words, the world's #1 player had to persuade her own sponsor to design around her vision. Then came the remark that transformed a fashion complaint into something much bigger. Unfortunately, next season, it's just not going to be that special for me. And with those words, what had looked like a disagreement over clothing suddenly sounded like the beginning of a much larger conversation about Nike's priorities and whether its biggest star still fit into them. Then came the moment that changed everything. Sabalenka effectively recruited her own fans into a public pressure campaign against her own sponsor. For Filipino fans who recognized Alex Eala as a long-term global branding project, while much of the tennis world was still debating her ranking, this was the moment all the evidence came together. First came the custom Sampaguita hair tie at Wimbledon, then the culturally inspired In Full Bloom capsule collection, then the Vogue Philippines cover-styled head-to-toe in Nike, and finally, the debut of Naomi Osaka's flagship 2026 Wimbledon dress on Eala instead of one of Nike's established stars. The trajectory wasn't imagined. It had been unfolding in public all along. Nike's priorities were visible for anyone willing to connect the dots. By this point, the conversation had moved beyond fan speculation. Even Sports Illustrated, one of the most respected publications covering tennis apparel and sponsorships, from Maria Sharapova's iconic Wimbledon looks to Serena Williams' headline-making outfits, offered a blunt assessment of Nike's current approach to women's tennis. Its verdict was simple. Nike tennis is extremely uninspired beyond Osaka. That wasn't the opinion of a YouTuber or a Reddit thread. It was an editorial judgment from one of American tennis media's most established voices, echoing exactly what Sabalenka had been hinting at in Riyadh while reinforcing what Nike's growing investment in Eala seemed to demonstrate. Industry insiders familiar with Nike's tennis division have also claimed that the company's dedicated tennis design team was dissolved years ago, with its responsibilities folded into a broader group covering sports, such as pickleball, badminton, and other smaller categories. Yet somehow, Nike still found the creative resources to design a custom Sampaguita hair tie, develop an entire Philippine-inspired capsule collection, and execute a culturally specific campaign around Alex Eala. Meanwhile, The reigning world number one was publicly saying she had to fight for input on her own outfits. Whether intentional or not, that contrast doesn't look like a question of resources. It looks like a question of priorities. The commercial results only added to the story. The Naomi Osaka Slam Dry Fit dress that first appeared on Eala sold out before Wimbledon 2026 had even begun, demonstrating that Nike's biggest creative bet in women's tennis had become one of its biggest retail successes as well. The momentum didn't stop there. The Naomi Osaka Showcase dress sold out before Wimbledon 2026 even began, and Forbes Australia had already named Alexandra Eala among the tournament's best-dressed players the previous year. Taken together, those aren't just isolated moments. They point to a broader strategy. Nike no longer appears to be building its women's tennis business solely around established Grand Slam contenders. Coco Gauff departed for New Balance. Iga Swiatek left for On in 2024. As the center of gravity in women's tennis apparel shifts away from the swoosh, Nike's response has not been to place all of its weight behind the reigning world number one. Instead, it has invested heavily in emerging markets, particularly Southeast Asia, one of the fastest-growing regions for athletic apparel, with Alexandra Eala becoming the face of that push. Now the calendar catches up with the story. Wimbledon 2026 is only days away. Sabalenka's new kit will be revealed first. Eala's grass court Nike collection will follow. After that comes the US Open swing. And then the end of 2026, the period many fans interpreted as the contract window behind Sabalenka's now famous remark, "Let's wait for 2027. The next chapter isn't months away. It's about to unfold, and whatever happens next, one thing deserves recognition. Sabalenka didn't voice her frustrations from the comfort of an off-season interview. She did it moments after losing the WTA Finals championship match to Elena Rybakina, her fourth consecutive defeat in a final against the Kazakh. That's usually the moment when champions thank their opponent, praise their team, and move on. Instead, Sabalenka chose to escalate the conversation. She invited fans to pressure her own sponsor. Whether that was a calculated show of confidence or a sign of mounting frustration is for the audience to decide. Since then, she has answered at least one question on the court, finally defeating Rybakina at Indian Wells to begin her 2026 season. But the bigger question,